Hello, everyone. My name is Connor Moran. I'm the Executive Director of Madison Public Library Foundation. It's so great to have so many of you with us today for our latest educational series event on special needs trusts. These events have been with us for about 4 years now in this format, where we've been able to bring very high quality experts directly to you in these lunchtime recordings. I do encourage you to take a look at mplfoundation.org, where we have more of these recordings for you on many, many different topics. I am delighted to be joined today by Johanna Allex and Kevin Hayde, and also to be joined by Andrea Shu, who is a member of our Donor Development Committee. Andrea is Development Program Director at UW Foundation, and she is going to be our host for today. Andrea, thank you so much for your time, and we'll let you take it away. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction, Connor, and good afternoon, everybody. I will not take up much of your time, but I'll say a quick thank you again on behalf of the Madison Public Library Foundation for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to introduce quickly our two presenters today. First, Johanna Allex, who's a partner at Stafford Rosenbaum LLP in town here. And we also have Kevin Hayde, who is the Executive Director at WisPACT, speaking to the very important but often complicated area of special needs trusts. So I will let the experts take over from here.
Thank you, everybody, and very happy to be here and to be speaking with you all about this topic. As Andrea said, I'm a partner at Stafford Rosenbaum. My practice focuses mostly on trust and estates planning, and have had a lot of opportunities where working with families where there's a special needs beneficiary involved. And so we've developed some tools for that family to use, and I'm talking today about some of the options that you might want to consider if this is your situation as well. So assuming this all goes well, I'm going to screen share my presentation. I labeled my talk estate planning when special needs special needs beneficiaries are involved. Now, my presentation will be much more general. Kevin is going to be speaking specifically to pooled community trusts and WisPACT, and as a really viable option for you to consider in terms of your overall estate plan. So without more ado, I will hopefully advance this to the next screen. All right, so the agenda is I'm first going to talk a little bit about general medical assistance and supplemental security income. I think it's important for you not to really dig into the weeds on this, but to know a little bit, because it does impact options that you may be able to consider for your plan. And then I'm going to talk about some tools to consider when structuring your estate plan. First, making sure that you are aware that your durable power of attorney for finances and property makes a difference in the success of your plan, particularly when a special needs beneficiary is involved. We'll talk about standalone third-party special needs trust, and I'll explain why it's called a third party. So make a little more sense after that. We'll talk about ABLE accounts, and then I'll talk very briefly about forming a sub-account with a pooled community trust, and then Kevin will take over. Okay, so what is general medical assistance and SSI? So medical assistance is a jointly financed program. It's a combination of federal and states, and it allows for qualified healthcare and long-term healthcare services provided to eligible enrollees. SSI is, as I mentioned, supplemental security income, and it's money from the federal government that's available for eligible enrollees. It's meant to help pay for basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. So the question is, how and what is an eligible enrollee? Well, they must be age 65 or older, be disabled or blind, and they also must be financially eligible. So there are income limits that each state imposes, and a lot of those limits are dependent upon the size of the household. And then there's also asset limits. And the asset limits are generally focused on the value of the countable resources. and not every asset will be countable. And that is something that is important to know in terms of if you are looking to bequeath certain assets to a special needs beneficiary. But for our purposes, the financial eligibility for resource limit purposes is less than or equal to $2,000 of countable resources. So why we're talking about this today is because an unexpected, well-meaning gift or inheritance could cause the MA or SSI recipient, or we'll call them beneficiary, to lose eligibility for a period of time. And while during that period of loss, theoretically they would be spending down or using the money or assets that you provided to them. There's certainly a lot of risk with that, but I think the largest risk is really what happens when they get down to the $2,000 of countable resources. Can they get back on MA or SSI? And that's really where the rub is. You don't want to see a situation where they're without. So it's best to try to plan so that they can benefit from their gift or inheritance from you, but not lose their benefits at all. Okay, so first is the durable power of attorney for finances and property. And I'm calling this a tool to consider because it does play a role in that if you are unable to carry out a plan, maybe you have a plan of focused giving to benefit the special needs beneficiary, or you're in the middle of estate planning and something happens to you where you can't manage your money or your finances anymore, it's good to have certain clauses in your durable power of attorney that allows for that planning to continue. And generally, I mean, there are very complex durable powers of attorney that are drafted where special needs planning is something that is absolutely going to be on the horizon. But generally, you see language that allows for special needs planning in gifting clauses and clauses where there's a trust that's created or funded. And that's because of usually without language in a durable power of attorney for finances and property that allows for gifting or creating and funding a trust, then that person can't do that for you. Your agent can't do that for you. And more importantly, a third party is less likely to recognize that a gift has been made if there's no authority in the durable power of attorney for the gift to have been made. Okay, so general options to consider. And some of these are thankfully more historical than actually in place at this time, but I wanted just to talk about this and so you get a more comprehensive picture as to why the tools that we'll be talking about may be good to consider. So first, people disinherit the beneficiary. They understand that gifting or inheriting would cause a loss of benefits for a period of time, or could cause a loss of benefits for the period of time. So they just say, nope, nothing to that person as the way to manage that. Another way is to leave that person share, the beneficiary share, to a third party with the intention that that person would take care of the beneficiary. And sometimes that works. In other words, that the person receives, that third party receives the money, they recognize the responsibility associated with it, and they do not commingle it with their funds. And money's there to use for the beneficiary, but there's some risk with that. First, this idea of commingling it's real. Things like that do happen. And if that third party is subject to claims of creditors, then their creditors may look at the money as being available to pay off debts, monies that are owed to them. And then the other piece of this is that when a third party transfers money to a beneficiary like that, it can cause that beneficiary to lose certain parts of their benefits, like the SSI, the supplemental security income, could be reduced. their benefits might be reduced, MA benefits. So it's a risky option to consider. And then the other is, we talked about this before, but gifting or bequeathing assets directly to the beneficiary, and with the hope that the beneficiary will be able to reacquire the benefits that they were formerly enjoying. So as I mentioned, that's risky because laws change, requirements change, all of that changes. And whereas a beneficiary might have been happily receiving benefits before, things may change, and so they may not be able to get on those benefits, or the funding might have changed, or the programs might have changed. So you want to avoid that. Okay, so what are some of the options to look at that do not involve the first three that we talked about? Well, first is a third-party special needs trust, and it is called third party because it is created and funded with assets, or created by another person, not the beneficiary, and funded with assets that are not the beneficiary's assets. And it's drafted in such a way that the assets in that third party special needs trust won't be counted against the beneficiary for purposes of determining their eligibility for benefits. Let's see, and it could be created, as I mentioned, by a third party, so parent, sibling, grandparent, or any other person actually, except for the disabled or elderly individual. And if a special needs trust is created with assets of the elderly or disabled individual, it's called a first party trust because it's created by them or somebody on their behalf and funded with assets that they are otherwise entitled to. And these types of trusts can be included in a person's will or revocable living trust, or they can be drafted as a standalone trust so that if it's anticipated that the funding or transferring of assets wouldn't occur until this third party passed, then it's probably best to do this in a will or revocable living trust. If there are assets that you want to gift now, then a standalone trust that would be created now and could receive funds now would be best. Okay, and one thing to keep in mind is that the standalone trust might be good if there are multiple people that want to make gifts to the beneficiary. So everybody can name that standalone trust as either a beneficiary of their estate plan or be making gifts to that standalone trust. And these can be revocable, but just not by the beneficiary. So the beneficiary should not be seen as having any control over either the trust or the assets in the trust. Okay, and the beneficiary or the trust must be seen as being for the sole benefit of the beneficiary. So you couldn't have a special needs trust where it was for the beneficiary and their siblings. That would not be permissible. So you'd have to make it just for the beneficiary. And permissible distributions from these types of trusts do not include food, clothing, or shelter. Now, there are ways to manage those needs that the beneficiary might have using these special needs trusts, but generally those are impermissible distributions, and that's because they can count against other sorts of benefits that the beneficiary might be receiving. Let's see, and with these third-party trusts, you as the creator or the third party can determine what happens with assets that remain in the trust after the beneficiary dies. That's as opposed to a first party special needs trust, which has a Medicaid payback or state recovery provisions, and that if there are assets remaining, then the state can claim those to reimburse itself for monies that were spent for benefits that were provided to the beneficiary during their lifetime. Okay. So then another option to consider is an ABLE account. And ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. It was an act that was passed in 2014. And the act allows states to pass or to create tax advantaged savings programs for eligible people with disabilities. And those are people that were blind or disabled before reaching the age of 26. And the amounts in an ABLE account are not included, for the most part, in determining a person's eligibility for MA or SSI benefits, but there are certain limits to that, and I'll speak about those in just a minute. Now, these are accounts that the beneficiary can contribute to. Third parties can contribute to. Now, the third parties are limited to whatever the federal gift tax annual exclusion amount is for that year. And this year it's $18,000. And the funds in an ABLE account, they can grow tax-free, and they can be distributed tax-free for qualified disability expenses. So these would be basic living expenses, health and wellness, housing, financial management, transportation, education and training, assistive technology, and legal fees, to name a few. The ABLE account funds, so the total amount in the ABLE account can't exceed the state's limits for its 529 college savings plan. And here's where the amount in an ABLE account could be counted against the beneficiary. So if for some reason it grows larger than that amount or receives contributions, so it's larger than that amount, then the person will lose benefits, or their benefits will be suspended until the amounts are drawn down to what the state's limit was. And then any amount remaining in an ABLE account on the death of the beneficiary must be used to reimburse the state for medical assistance benefits that the person received during their lifetime. So it's like a first party special needs trust. Okay, then the last tool for you all to consider is the Pooled Community Special Needs Trust. And this is established and administered by a nonprofit organization for the benefit of multiple beneficiaries. And those beneficiaries usually are elderly and disabled or blind people. The assets in an account with the Pooled Community Trust will not be counted against the beneficiary for purposes of MA or SSI eligibility. And you can create sub-accounts within a Pooled Community Trust to be a third-party sub-account, with third-party funds. You can also create a sub-account with first-party funds or the beneficiary's funds. You just can't combine the two into one account. So it's possible for a beneficiary to actually have two accounts for their benefit, a third party and a first party. And separate accounts are maintained for the beneficiaries, but for purposes of investment and management, they're pooled. So you get economies of scale in that way. And then there's a master trust agreement that governs the separate accounts and funds of all the beneficiaries. And the accounts are brought into that by what's called a joinder agreement. So everybody's subject to the same larger trust agreement, but the sub-account may not actually have to sign on specifically to that trust agreement as if it was an original beneficiary. Let's see, and I guess that's it for that one. Now, what options do people commonly choose? Well, more than one option is generally pursued. And if I was to say which option was most likely to be part of the mix, it's the ABLE account. And I think that's because they're so easy and flexible. Now, I say easy, but Wisconsin right now does not have the authority to run an ABLE program, but it does recognize when an ABLE account is set up under other states' laws. So if you were interested in setting up an ABLE account for a beneficiary, then you would likely need to go through another state to get that created and funded. Now then, as far as the second piece or another part of the solution is that a lot of that driven by beneficiary needs, the availability of knowledgeable trustees, and the size of the assets. And those three factors play a large role in determining which option to pursue in addition to the ABLE account. And that would be whether to pursue a special needs trust, a standalone trust, whether it's a standalone or one that's created under a will or revocable living trust, or going with a sub-account in a pooled community trust. Now, in my practice, I see both, but I think I'm seeing more now where people are opting for the pooled community trust option. And that's because the rules and regulations surrounding MA and SSI are complex, and they're changing all the time. And not only the rules, but the interpretation of the rules change. And it's really difficult for many families to first identify somebody that would have the skill set to be able to manage those assets, and then in a way that wouldn't count against the beneficiary, and then also has the availability to do that. And so the pooled community trust, there's a ready staff that's available with those skills in place. They are on, well, at least with WisPACT, they're on the cutting edge of some of these MA or SSI rules, and are part of the conversation as they're starting to develop. And the fees are pretty reasonable in terms of what they would charge. So with all of this mix, I'm finding a lot of families are opting for either creating, after they die, a sub-account, or providing for the funding of a sub-account after they die, or creating one while they are alive, just because of these factors. So with that, I will turn this over to Kevin, who's here to talk to you about WisPACT, which is one of Wisconsin's pooled community trusts, but one that I'm most familiar with.
Thanks for that the introduction and all the detail for options available for families who are looking for options for their child or grandchild. So I will give you just a quick sort of intro. My name is Kevin Hayde. I'm the executive director for WisPACT. I've been with WisPACT since June of 2017. Previous to working at WisPACT, I had a similar position where I ran a pooled trust in Dayton, Ohio, through the Disability Foundation. So I've been doing this for close to 20 years. And my entire career I've spent working in the field of disability services. So I've done this from day one. I won't get into great detail of how long that's been, but it's been a great passion that I've had my entire work career. So WisPACT, we are not-for-profit, a nonprofit 501c3. Currently, we have about 4,800 trusts under management. And, I'll go into sort of roles and responsibilities and sort of our strategic partners and those that we work with to ensure that we're providing prudent financial management of those trust dollars. But we are the largest, if not one of the largest pool trusts in the entire country. And I'll get into a little bit about assets under management as well. But we wanted to make it sort of this beginning of this to provide a good sort of general overview of the organization and what we do. We have WisPACT staff can provide basic information to consumer about WisPACT operations and S&Ts in general, sort of what Johanna already provided to you, but we do consider ourselves an information and referral source. So if you are not sure what of the options that are available, if you want greater detail about what WisPACT does after the information I provide, you just want to have a conversation with our outreach manager or one of our attorneys, we'll make that available to you. There's no charge. It's just what we do. And they will tell you all the options available, just to make sure that people are allowed to make an informed decision. We process new trust applications, and if approved, we set those up with our trustee. Once again, I'll hit a little bit here about the partners that we work with. And each beneficiary that we work with is assigned a beneficiary specialist. And we'll talk a little bit about their role as well. They're sort of their front-facing customer service person here. I guess a good general term is sort of their case manager for the WisPACT trust. So they do have someone that can provide that hands-on sort of hand-holding approach that is often required in managing trusts and managing distributions out of the trust. So what I'm hoping to provide here is just sort of an overview, just to give everybody a good understanding of the growth of the organization, the work that we do, the various roles and responsibilities of our strategic partners that include a trustee and investment manager, why a special needs trust. I won't touch a whole lot on that because Johanna already covered that. Distribution services and estate recovery, which was touched on already as well. So just a little bit of history about the organization. The WisPACT permits the creation of self-settled trust for an individual with disabilities. The individual is permitted to transfer assets that would otherwise disqualify him or her for public benefits. So what was alluded to previously as what are considered countable resources, countable assets. Funds that are in one of the WisPACT trusts are not considered countable resources. So they don't count against your eligibility for MA or SSI. I'm not sure. Well, the two trusts that we have, the self-settled trusts, that's our trust one. That is basically funded with the individual's own assets. So they're funded by the individual, but the self-funded special needs trust, states have a claim against the remaining assets in the trust at the beneficiary's death. So that was the Medicaid payback that was referenced earlier. A unique feature of the pool trust is that it authorizes the trust to retain some or all of the funds that remain in an individual trust account when the primary beneficiary dies. And we'll talk a little bit about how we utilize those funds as well. The trust two, just have to move my screen around here, designed to, and these are the third-party trusts that was referenced as well, designed to hold accounts that are funded with property that belong to others other than the beneficiary. Trust 2 is most often used by family members, person with disabilities to receive current gifts from family members, or more often to be funded for the benefit of person with disabilities at the death of a family member. So when the estates are closed out and assets are moved to WisPACT, that's when we begin our role as the distribution settler. Third-party accounts are not subject to Medicaid payback or the retention of the trust at the death of the primary beneficiary. So we have been doing this, like I said, for about 20 years. We just hit our 20-year anniversary. And this kind of just gives you an idea of the growth trajectory, and I'll touch on it a little bit more. It's a growth that continues and something that we manage through our strategic planning as well, making sure that we're matching infrastructure with the needs of the beneficiaries and making sure our processes are covered and providing excellent customer service. I just alluded to at the end of 2023, growing from the first year back in 2003, we finished the year at about $201.5 million. Today, that's closer to 207 million. So it kind of gives you an idea of how this is. It's not just WisPACT that's growing. We're growing within a growth industry. The industry itself is depending on what organization that you're speaking with, and there's one available in each state. The growth is anywhere between 6, 8, 9%. So it's an industry that is growing quite a bit. Oops, what did I do here? Okay. So when we talk about any funds that are not clawed back by the state through a state recovery through the Medicaid payback process, those funds can come back to WisPACT, and they are placed inside of our retained fund. And those funds, 100% are to be utilized for the benefit of individuals with disabilities. So whether support services, we have created a grant program that will serve any current beneficiaries when someone goes through the entirety of their trust, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about this. They will still be eligible for grants. So one of the questions I get a lot from family members is, what happens when their trust is gone? And we still have the ability to pay for items that are considered need items, and it could be anywhere from cell phone bills to clothing to internet, paying your Spectrum bill, things like that. We can make some assurances to family members that there is a mechanism that we have, and these are legacy dollars. These are individuals with disabilities that passed away, and we're ensuring we hold it's a great deal of responsibility that we feel for ensuring that those go to help other people who were in similar situations and require support services as well. Our retained fund payments started out the first year that we had this grant program. We provided $105,000 in grants. At the end of 2023, or the entirety of 2023, we almost provided close to $6 million in grants to 2,607 individuals. So that is a lot of assistance that's being provided. So you can see sort of the growth trajectory of the retained fund and all the benefits that it can provide to individuals. We have, and I'll talk a little bit about this as well, in 2020, we established a WisPACT Foundation, and it's another mechanism that we utilize to maximize the impact of those retained funds and ensuring that we're providing support services where needed to residents of Wisconsin who have disabilities. So we only operate within the state of Wisconsin, whether it's for trusts or our retained fund or our foundation. Those funds have to be utilized for those individuals. So like I said, the foundation was created in 2020. We've provided close to $1.5 million in grants already just through 3 grant cycles that we've had, and something we're very proud of for sure. So when we talk about growth of the organization, because as a family member looking at options as well, stability of the organization, sort of trajectory of the business model, those are important things to look at. And so this goes back to 2015. So like I said, I started halfway through 2017. The average number of new trusts that we were bringing in was about close to 44 per month. We ended 2023 at close to 66 per month. So that's a pretty good growth, at least the period of time since I've been here. And already in 2024, we've done the most new trusts in January and February since we've been in existence. We are averaging close to 71 trusts per month. So when we look at sort of net gain for number of trusts that we are managing, it was about 8.5% for the entirety of 2023. So to sort of better understand, we don't do this by ourselves. We don't do any of we're not a one-stop shop necessarily. So we are the trust settler. So we have the master trust, and all the sort of rules and regulations and roles and responsibilities are outlined in the master trust. Who gets to do what, where the authority lies. So our service agreement is with the trustee specifically. So we work with Capital First Trust Company. We work out of their office in Milwaukee. They're headquartered, I think, out of South Dakota, but we work with their Milwaukee office. And they are the ones who are basically managing the assets. So we don't manage any assets ourselves. They do that. The assets are held at Schwab, and we utilize Fortis Private Bank as the depository. So money sort of funnels in and funnels out from Fortis to make sure the checks that are requested, the distributions that are requested are paid. So once again, as a trustee, the Capital First receives and holds the trust funds and other property provides accounting services, arranges for the funds to be invested. They just got out as of the 15th, so Friday, all of our K-1 and our grantor letters, that they're responsible for filing the taxes on the trusts. So they filed the 1041 every year. So those aren't responsibilities of ours. And now the investment portion of the assets, all the funds have to be invested. That's part of the regulation for pooled trusts. The investment side is managed by TrueLink Financial Service. So Capital First, we have our service agreement with them. They will manage the assets and ensure that prudent investment of them. And so they then have a service agreement with TrueLink Financial Services to manage those investments. So we don't have a say in the investments. We have an investment policy that TrueLink has to work within, but we are not SEC licensed. We are not permitted to make decisions about any investments. So we are very clear in our role. It's not a role that we would want anyway. We're not experts in investments. We are experts in managing those distributions, the funds coming in and going out. So like I said, TrueLink Financial, they serve as the investment manager of the assets held by Capital First. Through that service agreement, TrueLink offers 3 asset allocations, which is a wonderful product, and really why we decided to go with Capital First. They came to us with this sort of multi-asset allocation proposal, and once developed, it provides greater individualized investments for our beneficiaries. So this is just kind of a graph that we use. Once again, we're the trust protector, the settler for the trusts. We have our service agreement with Capital First. They have their agreement with the investment manager, and all the services are for the benefit of the beneficiary. So why a WisPACT trust? So it was alluded in Johanna's introduction. It's to protect and maintain Medicaid and SSI benefits. That's the primary reason for establishing a trust. We are, from the management of trusts, I think why we are the best option, because we are sort of a one-stop shop for the beneficiary. When it comes to the investment side, you don't have to go to an investment manager and have someone else manage those investments for you. We have expertise, sort of boots on the ground here, our beneficiary specialists that have that expertise in the sometimes ever-changing rules, the difficulty in navigating Social Security. We have that expertise in-house. So when distributions are requested, they know what can and can't be paid out of the trust. So that's the great asset that we are providing as well. You don't have to sort of bone up on all the rules and regulations yourself. We have that available to us in-house. Pooling assets, as Johanna alluded to as well, that allows for greater diversity. It keeps the fees down, and I'll talk a little bit about our fees as well. But typically our fees overall average with the investments, the trustee fees, our administrative fees, right around 2.13%, which is a bargain. Cost effective, let's say. Bargain sounds like sort of undercutting it. It's very cost efficient, let's just say. When it comes to distributions and sort of rules and regulations, we don't have our own rules and regulations. We don't create things just to sort of make things easy for WisPACT to manage. We optimize the ability for, or the benefits of these pooled trusts, utilizing the rules that Social Security in particular puts in place for us. And they have a guidebook that they utilize. It's the Program Operations Manual System. It's POMS. And so when we are, asked to pay for certain things, we have a reference point. We know what to go to and where to look up if certain distributions are allowed or not allowed. Professional services, we provide an array of professional services here. for the benefit of beneficiaries. I touched on that a little bit. We have 2 full-time attorneys on staff to ensure proper administration of the sub-accounts. They are another resource that we have in-house that we can, have conversations with to explore whether distributions are allowed. Source of funds, we need to make sure that the funds that are coming in are allowed to go into the trust that are designated. And so we have that in-house. Their primary responsibility is to the joinder agreements that are contribution agreements, we call them, for our master trust. We ensure that the creating attorneys, when they send those documents in, are complete. We have all the adequate documentation to go, whether there's a POA or there's guardian, that any beneficiaries that are listed for any funds, for leftover funds for our trust twos, for example, we need to make sure we have all of that information. So that's what their primary responsibility is, to review those as they come in. And like I said, we're about 70 per month, so they are certainly quite busy for sure. And our sub-account partner provides an online portal. One of the greatest benefits and one of the most important things, if you are looking for options for after you're gone, is to ensure that there is transparency. And so we have a great deal of pride in all of our best practices, but transparency is one of those. And you can go on as a beneficiary, or if you're an advisor to a beneficiary or a family member, a sibling, someone who's helping the individual, perhaps if they need that assistance to manage their distributions, you can go right onto the portal and you can go through all the account activity. You can call up your statements for each quarter to show unrealized gain loss. Everything is right there available to the person, as any sort of online banking. You can go on and see all the activity that occurs. And I think, once again, we're trying to provide, through all of the sort of common theme, through everything I talk about, is peace of mind for the individual and for the family. Move this. So payback, like Johanna alluded to, payback, there's an exemption for Trust 2. There is not a Medicaid payback for Trust 2 because the assets did not belong to the individual beneficiary. Sure. Okay, I think I will speed things up a little bit. I hope it's still understand. I'm just want to make sure I have enough time. Johanna already talked about ABLE trusts as a great option. ABLE accounts, we don't consider a competing entity or a competing resource or tool. That we consider it a complementary one. You can establish a WisPACT trust, and we can't, one of the things that we can't pay for is housing and food. Food is on, potentially it's going to go away as an in-kind support, so that might be allowed here. We hopefully coming along soon. But we can have funds established here, and we can transfer up to 18,000 for the current year into an ABLE account. And ABLE accounts are a national program, so you can have an ABLE account in another state. It sounds like the ABLE account in Wisconsin is heading to the governor's desk for signing and approval, but it sounds like they are going to not have their own. They're going to have sort of be a part of an association, a number of states that are covered under one. But with sort of politics as they are, we just kind of have to believe it when we see it, once it's finally established. And ABLE accounts are 529 plans, basically, for those who have 529 college plans. It's a sort of an offshoot, and they're codified by the IRS. There's another pool trust, special needs trust provider in Wisconsin, Life Navigators. They cover a lot of sort of southeast part of the state. They're certainly an option, and the SNTs, which Johanna covered. ABLE programs, like I said, I kind of gave some information. It's still up in the air, but it looks like it's going to get final approval. I just provided a couple sort of possibilities. Stable is probably the largest, I think, that have the most beneficiaries that have ABLE accounts. They're out of Ohio, but they cover, once again, all of these cover every state. And then there's the one that's ABLE National Resource Center. You can go to that site, the ablenrc.org, and it'll provide resources or contacts or links to all of those available in the country. And ABLE, once again, it's a complementary product. One thing to remember, you can only have one ABLE account. You can't have multiple ABLE accounts as an individual. Prudent investment, I talked about, one of the benefits that where I came from before, when I came initially to WisPACT, we had one investment option that was available, and that was it. Now we have 3 different investment options. We have a clear understanding that if you're 18 or you're 80, your investment needs are different. And now we have more individualized asset allocations available. When you first come into, or you first fund your trust account, it goes into our conservative portfolio that is 20% in equities, 75% is in stocks and bond markets. It's fixed income, sorry, and 5% is in cash. And then after a year, the investment manager, TrueLink, will do an analysis. They'll look at sort of spending habits, expected deposits. If you maybe have RMDs from inherited IRAs, you make regular deposits into the account, the age of the individual, overall balance, and then they make a recommendation as to should they stay in the conservative portfolio, should they move to the conservative growth, which is 40% in the stock market, 55% fixed income, or move to moderate, which is 60%, 35%. And then based upon those recommendations, Capital First is the one who makes the final decision as to where those are going to be placed. It's very, once again, I can't emphasize this enough. We don't have any say in those investments. Family members don't have a say. The individual doesn't have a say. I get a lot of people that call me and you should do this with the money, you should do that, especially in times where the market is a little bit more volatile, like 2022. If you are directing your funds through investments, then you are directing the funds. So it shows that you have control over them. That disqualifies it as it's now accountable resource. So we have to make that very clear that we are very proud of our prudent financial management. But and I appreciate sort of the recommendations that are made, but even we can't make any decisions about those investments. One of the benefits that WisPACT provides is that we manage unique assets, real property, and transfer on death deeds. Automobiles, we have a preference to any automobiles that are purchased, that we have liens on them, for the reason that you can then turn around and sell it, and now it becomes cash for you if there's no lien on it. This helps us to at least manage those purchases. Inherited IRAs, annuities. We do have some personal property that we hold in marketable securities. And then retained fund support. We have, if for families who are concerned about legal fees associated with creating a trust, we provide relief from that. If you have a trust one account that's $75,000 or under the funding amount, then we offer up to $2,500 in creating fees from our retained fund. So basically, sort of removing that as an issue, sort of a financial obligation of the beneficiary or the family. And for trust twos, it's $90,000 and under. And once again, the retained fund, you can receive up to $5,000 in grants to help pay for services that you have. This, I don't have to spend too much time on. We just went through our customer satisfaction survey. We had net promoter scores of 40 for our beneficiaries. Anything over 0 is good. The national average for all organizations that go through this process is 32. So we're very proud. That puts us in the high level satisfaction range. And we also survey our creating attorneys, and that score came in at 62 for 2024. Once again, that's a fantastic score. We consider the creating attorneys secondary marketing, because we both provide assistance to one another. We provide a product for if we can make their job easier by providing, a great option for them when they're having conversations with you, when they're discussing all those options, then we're doing our job. So that's why we always want to reach out and make sure that we are providing an optimal source or service for creating attorneys as well. Investments, all investment decisions, I talked about that, our investment policy, and that's reviewed once a year. Capital First Trust Company is our trustee, and TrueLink Financial is our, and I kind of already touched upon how they utilize their metrics for determining which. That should turn that off. Trust distributions, beneficiary, they provide us with a request for distribution. Some of the things that we require, once we get a request, it could be, I need to pay my Spectrum bill. It comes in with sort of this cover sheet that outlines the payee, the amount, and then their beneficiary specialist will review it. One of the two criteria I talked about POMs earlier, but sole benefit, as long as the funds are utilized for the sole benefit of that individual, then you're allowed to, then it's an allowable expense as long as it meets the requirements of POMs. So for someone who has a trust with us and lives with somebody else and they have a Spectrum bill, for example, the beneficiary can pay for 50% of that cost. If it's a shared expense, we can only pay for 50%. It also keeps, we're not allowed to, gifting. If you're going to, gift, the individual can't receive cash themselves, but they can't make large gifts to other individuals as well, because that doesn't meet the sole benefit requirement either. And that's a Social Security rule. Common distributions, dental expenses that are uncovered, private room differential, someone who's, a shared room is usually covered by MA, but you can have that difference between that shared room and a private room paid from the trust. Health and beauty, entertainment, travel, private caregiver. There's sort of a myriad of ways that individuals can utilize their trust. We can't provide any cash. It's, we want to make sure it's clear. We have this sort of conversation a lot. It's not an ATM machine. We don't allow for, can you just send me $1,000? That's not allowable. We do require that we get receipts for requests of distribution. So we can make a payment. It can be a reimbursement for somebody. But a credit card is a good example. We can pay a credit card vendor an expense, but we need the receipts to go along with the expenses that are listed on the bill itself. The bill itself does not act as a receipt, but those are all covered in our advisor guidebook. It's covered by our beneficiary specialists when they have their first contact with individuals. Direct payments to vendors, reimbursements, credit card payments. Can't use it. Once again, I talk about can't use it for, it has to be sole benefit, can't buy gifts for others, pro rata share of household expenses. Food, once again, that might be changing. State of recovery, we already talked about this already. The difference between sort of our Trust 1 and Trust 2, what that means, but once again, sort of the process for that is managed by Capital First. They file the request or the application for what that payback might be with Wisconsin, but it covers all states. So if you've been in multiple states, then you are responsible for paying back each one of those states where you receive Medicaid benefits. Capital First then directs us to, we have the funds that are in the account. They will tell us where the funds need to be allocated. It goes to the state, or if it comes back to our retained fund. Some typical things for the retained fund, what's covered, sort of listed here. Advocacy services. We have a total of 26 areas, grant initiatives that we provide. Once again, we try to make sure that we are providing a soft landing for individuals once they zero out their accounts. And like I said, we're doing that to a tune of about $6 million a year. WisPACT Foundation, I invite everyone to visit our website to see all the good works that we do, all the testaments, the stories that are on there. It's really wonderful, some of the impactful things that we've been able to provide throughout the state. Typical areas that are covered: education, entertainment. Unfortunately, we're being within this disability services, it's very underfunded when it comes to philanthropy. We're hoping to sort of narrow that gap as what's available, at least here in Wisconsin. These are just strategic areas that we're going to be looking at moving forward. Challenges, like anything, there's a serious mental health crisis in this country. We're working with a lot more individuals with mental health needs. We're trying to ensure that we're providing that training and education and that infrastructure within our office to help manage those things. But that's one of the primary areas that we're looking at, along with growth. And the last thing I want to make sure I covered was the best practices. For anyone, when you're looking at options that are available to you, I welcome and encourage you to ask the questions, basically. When it comes to fiduciary oversight, we have third party. We have contracted out our accounting services, or accounts payable, with Fine Point Consulting. We have a third party or a contracted CFO through CLA. We have an annual independent audit every year. And so we are always encouraging others, if they want a copy of it, they want to see it. I always encourage other pool trusts to do the same. The accounting guidelines that come along with being a Wisconsin certified exempt organization, we are in full compliance. TrueLink Financial, their responsibilities. I think any pool trust that organization should have a third-party investor. I also think pool trust shouldn't be their own trustee. That should be. But that's my own opinion. But I think that's helpful to ensure that you are providing very defined roles and responsibilities. We have annual review for conflict of interest with our board of directors. We don't have any reimbursed or paid board of directors. All of our decisions when it comes to decisions that are made when it comes to whether it's investments or operating budget, expenses that I can approve, the board approves, finance committee, we all have that outlined through our authority guidelines. So it's very clear and understandable. We have a finance committee that reviews the financials on a regular basis. We invite our TrueLink partners to come in, and they review quarterly summaries, each quarter, the progress for each quarter and the quarter coming up. They do that for our board members, each board meeting. And board of directors officers included treasurer. So we have a treasurer for oversight as well. And once again, we have an investment policy, which is reviewed annually. Best practices. If you are
Kevin, can I interrupt you quickly so you can
sure
sneak
can.
in a question or two before we wrap up?
Sure.
Thank you, both of you, for all of your time and expertise today. One question that came in through the chat: who can fund a special needs trust? If you're establishing one for your sibling, making sure that's up and running, who all can contribute to that?
Anybody and everybody except for the beneficiary. So
Right.
You can name, if your parents would like to include your child in their estate plan, you just need to give them the name of their special needs trust or WisPACT subaccount, or WisPACT trust, I guess they would call it, to include in the documents.
And so, like, if you do your will or estate plan, you can name WisPACT as the beneficiary for the benefit of. So, like, I have a son who's on the spectrum, and for my estate plans, I would have half my estate after my wife is gone goes to my daughter, and the other half would go to WisPACT for the benefit of my son.
Okay, great. We're at time. So we're going to wrap it up. A reminder to everybody who is here today that we're going to be sending around a link to a recording of the presentation, as well as the PowerPoint presentations that were shared. So those will be available to you and will be available on the mplfoundation.org website as well, if you want to share those with anybody for reference. Anything else, Connor, before we wrap up? I think we're all set. Thank you again to our presenters. All
Thank
right,
you.
thanks all.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.